All right, we are pleased to be joined by Jamie Watson. Jamie, you were the former uh, color commentator for Nashville SC, and now you are part of the Apple TV MLS crew. So, how's that going so far? And how was your first game calling for this new Apple deal?
Still doesn't, yeah, I don't know if it's sunk in yet. You know what I mean? The way you just said that was really cool because I've been really fortunate when I stopped playing. It was a dream job to cover Minnesota United the first 3 years after I was done playing, and then getting to go to Nashville as they started in Major League Soccer. That was the dream job. And then as the landscape sort of changed, and you say Apple and Major League Soccer, it's still a pinch me moment. And we got through game one, and it was incredible. It was way more than I ever would have expected. And my partner Drake Cordero eloquently put it after the game. It was day one of 3,650. So it's amazing that that's behind us, and we have a really high threshold that started the first broadcast off. So now we just got to keep topping it and try to do better and better each week.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about that partnership. Do y'all know each other before? Or y'all like what's the did you have time to practice together, or are y'all kind of learning on the fly as you go?
It was really interesting because, obviously as this process happened, we were seeing the names that would come out, and then your name would come out, and then there was the third wave. And so you were interested to see who you're going to get partnered with. And then I knew Dre from just whenever Nashville would play Inter Miami. The broadcasters would kind of call each other and say, hey, look, like, we know this team really well, but we maybe don't know the other team very well. Can we just put our heads together? And I think the first time Jerry and I talked, it took us about 30 minutes before we actually got to the soccer X's and O's, because we were just catching up and talking, and kind of like well, guys, kind of like we were before we went recording with this thing. You just start talking and you hit it off, and couple good guys here on the pod, and then he's a great dude. So I just started chatting with him, and then it was like, oh yeah, by the way, we got to go because if we've got to go into the stadium here. So it was it was really good to chat with him, and I lucked out. I mean, he's incredible. He does Champions League games, he does Serie A games, he did the national team before, switched networks, and the rights changed for the U.S. men's national team. So I certainly lucked out getting Dre, and I'll get to work with some other really good commentators along the way. I'm sure, as his schedule's busy, and I'll fill in with some other crews. So, man, it's awesome. But what an all-star lineup of broadcasters we have. Apple TV and Major League Soccer with this MLS season pass outdid themselves with the people they were able to get to sign and be a part of this project. And I'm very lucky to be a part of it.
So there's an Austin connection with you. You played for the Austin Aztecs for a little bit. Tell us about that.
Man, House Park. I was there. I actually played in 2008 for a little bit, when they were still a PDL team. I was transitioning from playing with Real Salt Lake, and I needed to get some games, get some fitness. I was training with FC Dallas, and then I would drive down. I would train with Austin close to the weekend, and I would play. And Wolfgang Sunholz, God rest his soul, wonderful human being, a godfather of soccer in Austin. He was incredible. He brought me down there. Adrian Heath was a part of the project at the time, and played there in 2009 and 10. Absolutely loved my time there. I claim Austin. I was a little bit north up by Lakeline Mall and Cedar Park, but I was there before Austin blew up like what it has over the course of the last, 10, 12 years since I've been there. Biggest regret was not buying even just the smallest house or piece of land by the
Yeah.
domain, because it was right by when the domain first started to be a thing, is when I was sort of leaving. And we played at House Park. We used to get some great fans. Chantico's Army. I haven't said that name in a while. Everly's Army. They were the fan base that was there. I met a lot of wonderful people, because back then there was a really good intertwining of the players and fans, and there still is, but especially then, they would literally come down on the field after the game. So whether you wanted to talk to them or not, they were right there, and it was great. And had a lot of good times off the field. Austin's a wonderful place. I enjoyed my time there, and I can't wait to go back this weekend and just wander around like I did last year when I was there. And I was so sad when we left. Truth be told, I didn't want to leave. Fate had its part in it, and I actually ended up going to Orlando and meeting my wife only a couple months later after we got there. So I think the big man upstairs knew what he was doing when he said, hey, you need to go with this Austin team to Orlando. And I was sad when it left for the people of Austin and fans of Austin, but they got their team that they so fully deserved, and it's 100 times better than we could have ever dreamed back then in 2010 and when I was there. And look at it today. It's one of the gold standards for fan bases and stadiums and in-stadium experiences now in Major League Soccer at Q2.
Yeah, I think you'll notice that Q2 is a little bit different than House Park. House Park is still
Slightly
there.
different, right?
House Park is still there, still kicking. They still have, I
After
think,
the flood a while back, where like had it like legitimately 6 feet underwater. So yeah, I'm happy. We got a chance to come to Q2 last year when Nashville played against Austin in that 1-1 draw. I think that was a special night because that was right in the thick of Hani Mukhtar versus Sebastian Driussi. MVP votes were going back and forth when they played. So that was a really fun time of season, and I think it was 1-1 draw on the night. But the fans, oh, what an atmosphere! I cannot wait for that on Saturday night to see that again in person.
Yeah, so that is. I wish we could talk to you about Austin for a little bit longer, but that is the reason why we're talking to you, is because you're going to be on the broadcast with Drake Cordero uh, on this match between Austin and Montreal. So Montreal finished the year really strong last year, third in the East. They still have some experience throughout the team, especially towards the back of the team, but they lost a lot of attacking talent in this team. Who's going to fill those gaps for them? Who are the guys who need to step up in the attack to be able to maintain their level?
Yeah, this Montreal team is going through transition, right? You lose Wilfred Nance, he goes to Columbus. You look at Georgi Mihailovic leaving. Mason Toy hasn't been able to stay healthy for them. When he does, he's been very influential for them. They've had Romel Kyoto have stretches where he can be stellar on the night. He's got an exceptional verticality to his game that can stretch the field, and then he more often than not makes the right shot selection when he gets there. But I think this Montreal team, after watching their matchup today from this past weekend, went on Apple TV, navigated across that MLS season pass, got distracted along the way watching some of the other drone videos, and I was like, no, focus. You gotta go to where you want to go. It's easy to get lost in the magic that's on MLS season pass. And so I started watching the game. I walked away from that 90 minutes. It was a 2-0 loss to Inter Miami, thinking that this team is still trying to figure out who they are. And obviously that's not a hot take or anything brilliant because it's 90 minutes under a new coach. But I think with Hernan Losada, I think the way in which it ended, if I put myself back into being a player and I watched what happened with his time at DC United, and I was in a different locker room. Maybe I know a player, maybe I don't. I'm kind of on the outside looking in. You kind of read the same things. You hear the same things. You hear a lot of the things that were said about the DC United locker room after he left and sort of his management style. When he gets named the coach and he comes into your locker room as a CF Montreal player, I think it still is a transitional period where it's a different manager profile with the way that it ended than a coach that comes in who's had an immense success. Take example Bob Bradley when he goes from LAFC to TFC. It's Bob Bradley, former national team coach, coached around the world, one of the most successful Major League Soccer managers of all time. He's won your respect. He has the equity and the stock built up that you go, if he says this, I probably need to listen because this guy knows what he's talking about and he's proven it. Now, with Hernan Losada, there may be some tentative learning curve to it still with the players where they're still taking on board what he's saying, but maybe the adaptation period is slightly slower because there is a warming up period to it. And, this is me. I'm outside looking in, right? I'm not there inside the locker room, but I just saw a team that is trying to do a little something different in a similar formation, but putting the new coach's twist on it. So I think that takes time. I think it'd be ridiculous to make a decision on if it's going to work or not based on 90 minutes, much like if you based what the 90 minutes from Austin versus St. Louis look like. That would be a ridiculous take for both teams, St. Louis and Austin. I think CF Montreal is in a period in which they're going to find some adversity from this weekend, and then you're going to find the response to it this weekend at Q2 Stadium. And it'll be interesting to see because we'll see where the players are and how they are adapting to the new manager And I think the one thing that will show, that the easiest thing that you can point, is the amount of effort and energy and enthusiasm CF Montreal starts the match on Saturday night with. Do they come out and look like they want to prove a point? If the manager has really lit a spark, if losing pretty handily had an impact on them, and if the coach has been able to get them to where they need to be properly to go against a very good Austin team at Q2 Stadium. So we're going to see, and you'll be able to tell in the first 15, 20 minutes if they're up for it. And that response will tell me how that adaptation period is going with Hernan Losada and CF Montreal.
So, like, as a player, what would you be looking for? Like, what kind of things can a guy like Losada do that doesn't have the track record to maybe jumpstart that a little bit? Like, how does he show that he's learned, or that what happened in the past was a little bit of a fluke?
I think, and by the way, I want to be very clear that I don't necessarily, I don't think that everything he did at DC was wrong. I don't think that he had the roster that could have necessarily really truly competed. And I think in hindsight, you can look at it and say, there's still a ways to go, and they're in the process of trying to get where they want to be and where they once were in the glory days, right? I think I would want, if I was a player in that locker room, what I would want from the new coach, I'd want him to find a way to connect with me individually, right? He's going to give his instructions to the team. But for me as a player, I always appreciated and connected and was willing to go the extra mile for a coach if I felt there was some connection. Some players need to have their arm, by the coach put around him and say, hey, come here, let's talk. Like, I want to give you, compliment, constructive criticism, compliment, because they can't really handle it. Some of them he needs to come over and figure out, and he needs to go, I need to know who you are. You need to show me. They need a challenge, right? So we'll see how each player responds individually with their bounce back performance from last weekend's loss. And I think by how much enthusiasm and running around and willingness to get into a tackle, willingness to chase down a loose ball, to pressure a defender, if they do that, that'll be a very encouraging sign. And that'll make me start to think, okay, he's got these players, right? It was bad performance. Every team can have one of those and will have multiple of those throughout the season. But you can tell by the players' body language and their just overall effervescence when they step on the field if they want to make it right. And chances are, if they want to make it right for themselves, but also for the manager.
You talk about that man management. From everything we've heard of Losada's kind of track record before DC and then his time during and after DC, he seems to be a bright tactical mind. That's kind of what got his name on the map, is kind of being this really bright person when it comes to the soccer side of things. But it seems like all the problems were on the man management side. And so I think you make a great point that, like, that's the part that, like, has he learned his lesson? Will he be able to turn that around and do a little bit better of a job this time? So talking about the tactics, it seems last year Montreal played pretty attractive soccer, being able to control the ball through the midfield. Losada, if I'm not mistaken, likes to play a bit more of a direct style. And watching that game the other night against Miami, they seemed pretty disjointed, trying to transition from that old style into the new style. What can Austin take advantage of, or what can Austin do to be successful in this game against Montreal?
Yeah, and I think to the first point about Losada, he's still only 40 years old, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as a manager, he's still evolving and learning. So I'm excited to see it, because my respect for him will go tenfold if I see him tweak the things and learn from the mistakes, right? People make mistakes all the time. I make hundreds of them a day, but I think the people around me in my life, and the people who, are looking at me, look at the response to it. And if it's a good response and look like, hey, you learned and you've adapted and you've grown from it, your respect shoots, through the roof. That's how I'm hoping it's going to go for Hernan Losada and for CF Montreal. They are going to do things a little bit differently. Man, I remember watching CF Montreal play last year against Nashville, and it was so disciplined from Wilfred Nance's team. As soon as they lost the ball, they were back into position. It was incredibly difficult to break down. And if you were turning on a game for the first time watching Montreal last season, you were like, man, this is like, it was like a pitcher's duel almost, of like two teams in that Nashville Montreal game that were just so sound structurally, defensively, and didn't make a lot of mistakes, right? I think this team that we're seeing now with CF Montreal will take some chances and want to play a little bit higher up the field and don't mind turning teams around. And when they are able to get Mason Toye up there next to Kyoto, I mean, why wouldn't you turn around and have them go play in behind and stretch the field? Because then you get more room to operate underneath. And when you do that, Saliba, I think underneath, he's the 19-year-old trying to fill the big shoes of Georgi Mihailovic leaving. He'll have a little bit more room to operate. And then, you get Brogiar, who is a flyer on the right wing back role. Lapalainen, an attack-minded player, I think that's playing probably a little bit deeper than he would prefer, but that means he's got the attacking instinct in there as well. And then the ground that Piet and Wanyama cover in behind Saliba is miles and miles per game. So now if the field's stretched, there's bigger gaps. Now if you're playing 20 yards higher up the field, when you win a ball back, you can play an immediate entry pass into a final third, and you're right into it. You create a scoring opportunity or scoring chance. So that may be a little bit different because it may not be as methodical as what we're used to doing as far as pass, break a team down. So far, while there's this transition, Losada will put his touch on. I'm sure he would prefer that his team is able to do that and does that at periods of time. But if they do play, excuse me, a little bit more vertical and long, then it can unbalance some teams at a time. And maybe that is part of the mindset of Hernan Losada and how he wants his team to play in the mark he wants his team to put on the game.
Yeah, I think St. Louis proves that playing direct in a targeted and disciplined way, it can really disrupt what Austin tries to do. I think with what Austin has shown in one game, the look that they gave as far as attacking shape was pretty different. And then with what guys like Rigoni and Väisänen were able to show, I think there is some space to be kind of taken advantage of in those wide areas. Väisänen plays a really good, accurate long ball, and Rigoni was making some nice runs in behind, stretching that back line. They didn't all connect, but he made that back line stay honest and have to respect that run. And then that goal that Driussi scored was that same pattern, with Driussi and Rigoni both making similar runs, and it found Driussi. It could have found either of them really, but Driussi ends up with a good finish. So I think that's something that Austin can look for against this Montreal team. Another thing I noticed watching them against Miami is in this new shape that Austin's kind of doing, you have Driussi and Fagundes playing as kind of like dual 10s underneath that space. And I noticed that Wanyama and Piet, as they pressed up, were leaving a pretty big gap between themselves and the center back. So I think Austin needs to look to kind of take advantage of that space that they're leaving in front of the center backs and get the ball to Driussi and Fagundes more, because they did not do it enough against St. Louis the other night.
Yeah, that's a very good breakdown of it. Really accurate. I'm going to steal all of that, what you said.
You're welcome to.
Verbatim. It'll be just between us here. No, I think that's really smart. And the last thing any team wants to do is leave more room to operate for Driussi. But if Rigoni is running in behind, same thing that we just talked about CF Montreal when you do with Kyoto and with Mason Toye when he's back. Ibrahim to an extent can do it as well too. But all that does is just create bigger pockets of space for those really skillful players to go and find and pick their moments. If a back four is pressing higher, then you get in behind, or a back three in this case for Montreal. So it's just an added element. I think you need to have it. And Väisänen being able to play that long pass really does stretch things out. And we talk about, Losada and his sort of his ability to bounce back, right? I'm very interested to see, because Cascante went off within the first 10 minutes of the match. If Kip Keller gets a chance to start, how's he going to respond? Look, if Kip Keller would have come into the game and he would have scored 3 goals, would we have said that he was the greatest soccer player alive? Probably not. So if he comes in and he's at fault, marking Tim Parker on the first one, obviously the bad back pass, and then getting chopped for the third goal. If he would have had a hand negatively in 3 goals, are we going to say he's the worst soccer player in the world? No, let's keep some perspective. Let's see what the response is. And we're going to find out about a player who's played 7 professional games, how he responds to adversity. This could be something that's very, very good for him. And this 3-2 loss to St. Louis, could be very, very good for this Austin team, because sometimes you need to take a rude awakening or a punch in the chin to be reminded that that can hurt, and it can happen if you're not sharp at all moments, and concentration is at the highest it can be at every moment of every game. And these things are going to happen. At the end of the day, it's just the same if they would have lost 1-0, and it's just the manner in which they lost to a team that they were highly favored to win at home. And it's one game. Let's see what the trend is and how they respond to it, both as a team and Kip Keller, how he responds to it individually. But keep in mind, Austin were down, they came back and tied it. They were down, they came back and tied it. Go down 3-2. Triusi hits a crossbar right before the 90th minute, doesn't he? This game could have been very easily 1-1, where you've come back 3 times. So the team didn't quit. They showed it last year. Virtually every time they were down, you always knew they were going to come back. So they've got some character established to this group with a lot of returning players. So I'm very excited about this match, because both teams need a good response from last week. So that should just take this game and amplify it even more. And there should be more energy, more running, more crunching tackles, more finishing, more goals, everything that you could want for a game. So I'm very, very excited to be in Austin this Saturday night with Dre on the call for this one.
See, and now we'll be even, because I'm going to play this back for all my Austin friends who convinced the season's over after one match and we need to burn the whole team down. So this is a symbiotic
Jeremiah,
relationship. I love this.
You are absolutely spot on. You and your silky smooth buttery microphone that you're talking into there. You say it louder for anybody that's doubting right now, because this team is a very, very good team, well coached, and they are going to be just fine. It's one loss. Sky's not falling.
All right. Well, Jamie, thanks so much for joining us. You can catch Jamie and Dre Cordero on the call for Austin FC versus CF Montreal. That's going to be on Apple TV, the MLS season pass. I think, Jeremiah, do you remember if this game is free or do you have to have the season pass?
I believe this one is also free.
Okay. Yeah. I think
there's a lot of free games. There's a lot of free games. If anybody's on the fence, just turn it on. There's a lot of free ones. And that MLS 360 show is something special too. So make sure you check that out as well.
Yeah. Well, Jamie, thanks for joining us. Long live House Park.
Yeah. Long live House Park. Hey guys. Thank you very much for having me on. Keep up the great work. Love the podcast.
Thank you.